Hello my lovelies, and welcome to today's video. I'm so excited to be starting this new little chapter on Aleyez Creations. I'm Alya and I'm so glad you stopped by. Today we're going to be talking about a little disease that I've had to have a lot to do with in my career. I see it a lot. I speak to a lot of people that suffer from it, and I've come to know a few little nuances, little anecdotes about the disease. So I'm going to share that all with you, as well as a little bit about the anatomy and a little bit about how the disease works as far as we understand it. So I hope you can stick around and learn a little bit about macular degeneration with me today while I create this look. Hope you like it, hope you hit the like, stick around and hear a little bit about ophthalmology and macular degeneration. Okay lovely, so where do we start? I've already got my face pretty much on, so we're going to focus on the eyes again. And create something really fun and colourful. It's got a lot of monochrome going on, so we're going to get into a little bit of colour. But yeah, so to understand macular degeneration, I think the most important part is to really appreciate the different parts of the anatomy of the eye. And what we need to know is that the very back surface is made of layers, and one of those layers is the pigment epithelium, which just means that it's a pigmented layer and it catches the light. And the way it does that is by having lots of cells that work really hard. And when cells work really hard, they throw out a lot of debris, a lot of sort of byproduct from all their hard work, a lot of rubbish. And then you have other cells that come in, take that rubbish and deposit it back into the central rubbish disposal system. And when we get older, the cells don't do such a good job of disposing the rubbish anymore. And when those little cells kind of switch off, we as clinicians see little yellow tiny spots throughout the central part of the eye, throughout the macula. And I'll try and bring up a picture for you guys to see what that looks like. And we call those drusen. The drusen drues are these kind of, they look like little piles, little tiny little sort of piles that just no longer work. You can tell because everything around them is smooth, it's regular, it's organized, but then you get this little tiny little blimp that isn't doing the right thing. And that's how we know it's usually degenerative or something is failing in that area. What we've been telling people, and this is what I'm really passionate about, is that if you have enough of these two very, very important antioxidants, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, and you don't smoke, and you get plenty of fresh air, you protect yourself from UV using sunglasses, and you otherwise remain healthy, chances are that you won't have such severe disease, or you may not have disease at all. It's your biggest chance to protect your body from degenerating further, and that is supporting its regenerative abilities. The first antioxidant we have to know a lot about is lutein. Lutein is really abundant in green leafy vegetables, broccoli, things like that. It's very easy to just type it into Google and figure out where you can find it. But yeah, anything that's green and luscious will have lutein in it. And lutein is not just an antioxidant, it also has anti-inflammatory properties. Now the main role is assumed to be that of protecting the macula. Now it sounds kind of, science fiction-y a little bit. But what it does is it goes in and helps that regenerative process kind of power back up or continue to work. At least that's how we understand it. And from my 10 years of clinical work, we have found that people who have good diets or don't smoke, or basically the only reason they're having macular degenerative changes is because of bad genes, or perhaps a poor childhood or poor environment, things like that, or a lot of sun damage. There are other factors that can be stopped, that are no longer happening. So they have the start of the condition, but it doesn't progress. Alternatively, those who are diabetic, or who do smoke, or who do not really consume good amounts of fresh leafy vegetables or just fresh food, they tend to progress pretty quickly in their disease. This is purely anecdotal, this is purely what I have seen, and I talk to every single patient about diet, and I hand out information to every single patient about diet because it's the easiest way to make a difference. And sometimes it may not make a difference, but it won't hurt, right? So I am encouraging everybody, regardless of whether you have macular degeneration in your family or not, regardless of whether you're a sun worshipper, or not, regardless of whether you are a smoker or not, diabetic, all the other risk factors, have any other kind of vascular issues or not. So that means blood issues or not. It doesn't matter. I highly encourage everybody who can digest green leafy vegetables, as long as your tummy can handle it, you go ahead and you have some. Now, it's not about not having that piece of cake or not having that biscuit or not having whatever else. It's about having it with that extra bit of antioxidant and so forth and so on. Now, I'm not a dietitian, but that's the kind of thing that I personally practice. I don't deny myself. I mean, I'm very sort of, I don't know, not careful is not the right word, but selective with how I eat, because I think it's important to eat the right thing, but I do not deny myself the things that I enjoy. I just make sure that on top of that, I'll have, say, green smoothie. Very easy. Take a huge packet of, say, spinach. That's an easy one for us in Australia to get access to a pretty good quality version of. Throw it all into a mixer, break it down. I usually throw some celery in there as well and some other things, and freeze it into individual portions. And then every morning you throw that block of icy spinach into your smoothie with a banana, some almond milk, and you're good. There's your breakfast done, your antioxidants done, you know, all these beautiful vitamins and minerals done. And, you know, so easy. So easy. The other antioxidant that's really good for us that we don't need as much of is zeaxanthin. So definitely don't eat as much of it as you do the lutein, but together they really help protect the eye from any kind of UV damage or high intensity light damage, and I would say probably free radical damage that we get from other sources too. So again, found in a fresh beautiful diet, pretty easy to come by for most people around the world. And if you can't get it in your diet, there are definitely fantastic, high quality, very reliable supplements that you can have. And I'll try to remember to link a few down below, because this is not a sponsored video, but at all. I don't get any professional or YouTube or any other kind of sponsorships for talking about these sort of things. This is my personal experience only. And yes, if you're not going to commit to having some greens in your diet, then go ahead and have some powders or capsules instead. Again, if your tummy can handle it, then I would highly recommend you include it in your routine. But you're probably wondering, okay, that's fine, I can protect my macula, but what happens if I don't and I do end up with macular degeneration, or somebody who's elderly in my family already has it? What happens then? What's going on in their eye? So I would still recommend everybody protects their body in general with beautiful antioxidants, not just lutein and so forth, but you know, just generally healthy fresh diet, good amount of rest, all that sort of common sense stuff, human connection, good social atmosphere as well. All these things definitely help us stay healthy. You know, if you can't physically see someone, especially now with COVID, that's okay. You give them a call, or you know, talk to a stranger in the park. It really doesn't matter. The human connection is quite invaluable. Like, it's just so important, and couldn't stress to you enough just how important. So first we see those little yellow spots. We talked about that. And that's just the beginning. The next thing that happens is those spots multiply and they grow into sort of mounds. That's when you know you've got a bit more progression in the disease. And what the body just sort of automatically does when something isn't working is it sends more supply, more support. And it does it in the way of growing new vessels, or you'll hear doctors call it neovascularization. So just new vessels are growing. That's all that means. Big word, but simple concept. And they go in to save the day, but like most things that try and save the day, they get it terribly wrong. And they are weak because they're new and they're unnecessary and they're not really meant to be there. That's not how the eye was originally designed to be. So instead, all those beautiful new vessels that were supposed to bring more antioxidants and more supply to the area, they just pop and bleed. And they usually bleed into the retinal space, because remember we talked about it being the very specific layer that we're targeting here. So are the vessels. So the blood tends to go in between those mounds and the rest of the retina, or underneath. It's really scary. It's actually probably not that extreme to begin with, but then as those mounds and whatnot form and progress and get worse and get thicker and more cells die or more blood forms, then the vision drops. The next sort of thing is that how do you get rid of that blood? Does it go away by itself like a bruise? Does it just sort of suck back up into the bloodstream? And the answer is unfortunately not. Because once those new cells have grown, once those new vessels are there and they're popped and started to bleed, they're going to continue to do that. It's not like they can be strengthened in any way. So to those patients, I still recommend a really good diet. I still recommend to support the cells that are left, because there's always going to be cells left. That's never going to stop. And what we do is we offer a treatment. So in Australia, we've got 2 amazing drugs that are just phenomenal. Like, they've been absolute lifesavers to some people. And what they do is they go in, and a special enzyme, or a special, like a lock and key type mechanism, goes in, finds those leaky cells and closes them off. And we have to do that on a regular schedule. So we start off by doing 4 weeks. Every 4 weeks they get an injection, and then once we see that the bleeding has slowed down, we try to do it every 6 weeks, and then every 8 if we're successful, and every 10 if we're successful, and that's usually where we about stop. Now, what happens there is that lock and key is active for a while, but then because the bleeding's constant, we have to go in and stop and stop and stop, and it's kind of like a chasing your tail situation. So what we do is every month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whenever the patient is scheduled to come in, we'll do a scan. We'll see how much of that mound of that bleeding that we see, and if we are successful, we can extend them, but if there is new blood, we'll inject some more of the beautiful drugs that we have available to us. And one is called Alya, and the other one is called Lucentis. There's different medical jargon as to which one we choose, but we pretty much use them both fairly equally. It just depends on what the patient requires and whereabouts their bleeding is occurring. And then eventually, at the very end of it all, after years and years and years of receiving treatment or not, the scar tissue is so severe, and there are so many blood vessels that we've had to switch off or have switched off on their own, that the area becomes completely void of cells. So it's completely atrophic or clear, barren, and then of course the site isn't there. But what's important to remember, and this is another thing I'm very passionate about, is the wonderful retina, just the wonderful human body and what it can do. Now, even when the central area is completely gone, and all you see in the middle of your vision is just a black spot. Some people see just a spot, some people see like a little half moon or stroke or whatever the shape that replaces where their vision used to be. The wonderful thing to remember is that's not the end. Our wonderful eyes are designed in such a way that there's a reserve. Now, what do I mean about a reserve? It's a bit tricky, this reserve, because it's not in the middle, and the brain from before birth, is programmed to use that middle. So what I've been trying to teach some of my patients is, instead of looking directly at what you want to see, try and think of where your best vision is. Do you have to look at 3 o'clock to see the 9 across the way? Do you have to look at the 12 to see the 6? And so forth and so on. So sometimes deflecting the central vision makes it possible to use that remaining vision. So what do I mean? The bullseye is gone. If you can imagine an archery target, the bullseye is gone. That's the part that is affected. But the immediate circle around, or perhaps the one around that, that's still there, and that's usually still healthy. And what you do with that healthy vision is you maximize on it. It's not so simple. Like I said, the brain is going to always want to use that target, that central bullseye vision. It's not going to want to use some side peripheral vision, but it is possible to train it to do so. The other thing that I've seen really, really positive outcomes from is a lot of patients will tell me that they do crossword puzzles, or they do some sort of brain training activity. Some are into Sudoku, some are into crosswords, some are into reading a lot, for example, which, look, it does get sad because they can't really do it anymore functionally once they get this disease. But what I have found is the ones that really exercised their brain and their eyes, they tend to do better for longer. I had one wonderful patient, one of my very earliest patients, and she's sadly not with us anymore. She's quite elderly and quite sickly towards the end, but heart of absolute pure gold, just amazing woman. She would knit. She would knit little coats for penguins that were stuck in an oil spill. She would knit squares that would eventually go into a quilt. And she knitted my little boy, when I was pregnant with my oldest son, a pair of booties that not only did he wear, but then also his brother wore. And you know, just the kindness of such an act. And she did most of it on feel. It definitely wasn't coming from vision per se, but not only did she have a very active mind, because she had such a beautiful skill that she constantly practiced and kept her mind youthful, but she also was able to figure it out for herself. So that vision deflection, or eccentric fixation as we call it, that use of the remaining eccentric circle of the around the target instead of the bullseye, she had that down pat, because If you notice people who do things all the time, like sewers or knitters, they're not going to sit there and look at what they're doing like this. They don't. They kind of just, they're down here doing it and they're watching TV or they're having a conversation. They might stop, you know, put their thumb over their needle, have a cuppa and keep going. And having such a great active skill really keeps the mind youthful. At least that has been the experience that my patients have mostly had. Whereas the ones that are specifically the ones that are lonely, or the ones that don't have much interest anymore, or never had for that matter, they don't tend to do as well. So I'm very encouraging of finding a hobby that you can keep for life, whether it's, you know, just doodling or writing poetry, or just even keeping a journal, or if you do enjoy maths puzzles or crossword puzzles, by all means keep it up, because it does help all those cells to keep active and youthful. Alright, well, I hope that today's video was fun and informative and a little bit different for you guys, and I hope you like my look. I just went a little bit crazy with the color, with yellows and purples and pinks and browns. Love the combination because they're all beautiful natural looking colors, so they do blend absolutely beautifully together, and a pop of navy on the eyeliner. So yeah, having a lot of fun with color just to offset my black and white situation going on, and I hope that wherever you are, you're staying safe and healthy and keeping up all the things that would normally keep you happy. I'm definitely doing some extra things on Instagram these days, so head over there and have a look at all the little bits and pieces that are going up there. I'm trying to stay on top of things and stay active on both the Instagram and over here and keep things interesting for you guys. If you haven't yet subscribed, how are you going to know when the next thing's coming up? So go ahead and hit that big red button. It's so inviting. They've made it red for Pete's sake. So let's go ahead and click it. And I hope that wherever you are, you're happy, you're safe, you're healthy, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Bye.